Despite growing up in the spotlight, Stanley Fafara, who is best known for playing Whitney on Leave It to Beaver, had to deal with a far harsher reality off-screen. In contrast to his innocent on-screen persona, Stanley battled personal issues that caused him to take a challenging route. After his Hollywood fame faded and he faced hardship, he ended up where few could have predicted him to be. His situation was so bad that he couldn't even buy a gravestone when he died at age 53. However, what became of this erstwhile child star? How did a well-liked performer from one of the most cherished sitcoms in America wind up in such a tragic situation? Join us as we reveal the sad theory of Stanley Fafara's ascent, decline, and unexpected turn following his death. Jerry Mathers, from Little Ricky to the Beaver. Jerry Mathers had a brief but noteworthy appearance on I Love Lucy before becoming America's favorite Beaver. Mathers had a minor cameo in the 1953 episode Ricky's Old Girlfriend, sitting on Lucy's lap during a dream scenario. In the scene, Lucy envisions her husband Ricky abandoning her for Carlota Romero, an old flame. Ricky tosses coins into Lucy and Little Ricky's cups as they plead for money outside a movie theater, giving the scenario a comic twist. This interesting detail frequently goes unreported since Mathers, who was not given credit in the show, was mainly overlooked. This is even more intriguing because Mathers' ascent to fame began just 4 years before the premiere of Leave It to Beaver. This fun fact demonstrates how even the tiniest roles may serve as stepping stones to more significant chances and links to legendary shows. Who would have imagined that the boy sitting on Lucy's lap would become one of the most adored characters on television? The Cub Scout who won hearts. There were many detours on Jerry Mathers' path to becoming the Beaver. Despite his repeated auditions, the casting crew finally decided to cast him because of his Cub Scout costume. The 8-year-old Mathers arrived in his full uniform for one audition and was worried about being late for his den meeting. The producers recognized him as the ideal Beaver because of his genuineness and purity. In addition to showcasing Mathers' innate charm, this touching tale emphasizes how important authenticity is in the film industry. It serves as a reminder that sometimes the best audition tactic is just to be yourself. In addition to getting him the part, Mathers' sincerity won him over viewers for decades. This brief incident gives Leave It to Beaver's legacy a touch and demonstrates that honesty can make a big difference even in the cutthroat entertainment world. Toilet Trouble, a TV first. One of the first television programs to have a toilet on screen, or at least a portion of one, was Leave It to Beaver. In the episode, Captain Jack viewers witnessed Wally insert an alligator into the toilet tank. Even though only the tank was displayed, this was a daring step for television in the 1950s when such imagery was frowned upon. Because of worries over its content, the episode that was supposed to be the series debut was moved to the second week. Even the most ordinary things could make TV history, as demonstrated by this oddball incident that set a new standard and enhanced the show's appeal. Considering that something as basic as a toilet tank could lead to such a significant television milestone is fantastic. This episode continues to be a landmark in its own right, demonstrating the show's ability to strike a balance between humor and subtly pushing boundaries. From Small World to Beaver. The debut episode, a part of the Heinz Studio 57 anthology series, introduced viewers to the Cleaver family under the title It's a Small World. This was the show's previous title before it became Leave It to Beaver. Wally and Beaver, another discussed title, was turned down because the sponsor felt it sounded like a nature show. The show's emphasis on family life and mischievous behavior in childhood was aptly encapsulated by its eventual title, Leave It to Beaver. Interestingly, Harry Shearer, who became well known for his parts in The Simpsons and This Is Spinal Tap, was also a young actor in the pilot. Shearer's portrayal of Frank added intrigue to the show's extensive backstory. This behind-the-scenes glimpse reveals the creative process of naming a show and how a slight alteration may significantly impact encapsulating its spirit. Wally's unexpected replacement. Paul Sullivan, who portrayed Wally Cleaver in the pilot, nearly got the part, but Sullivan had a considerable growth spurt following filming, which made him appear much older than his on-screen sibling, Beaver. As a result, Tony Dow took his spot and became the undisputed Wally. Ironically, Dow was merely going to the studio with a friend and had no intention of auditioning. However, the casting crew recognized he was ideal for the part when they saw him. Dow's unplanned casting became a turning point in his career, and his portrayal of Wally is still recognizable. This story exemplifies being in the right place at the right moment. It also serves as a reminder of how erratic the entertainment business can be and how a fortuitous meeting might result in a lifetime of success. Wally, played by Dow, gained popularity, and fans still adore his relationship with Beaver, played by Jerry Mathers. The show was canceled after its first season. In its early years, Leave It to Beaver had trouble finding an audience, even though it is now considered a legend. Its lackluster ratings left CBS officials unsatisfied, and the show was canceled after just one season in 1958. However, after spotting its potential, ABC jumped in to give the sitcom another opportunity. This choice proved brilliant since Leave It to Beaver became one of the most adored sitcoms in television history and continued for 5 more seasons. If they had kept it around, CBS might have benefited from the show's eventual cult status. The early cancellation of the show also serves as a reminder that not all classics become successful immediately. Star Trek and The Twilight Zone, 2 other now iconic programs, also had early setbacks before gaining popularity. Ultimately, Leave It to Beaver triumphed over its uncertain start, demonstrating that sometimes a program only needs the proper network support. In the Soup was the most expensive episode. There aren't many memorable or expensive episodes in the history of classic television as Leave It to Beaver's In the Soup. In this Season 4 episode, Beaver carried a huge bowl of soup up a considerable billboard when he got humorously stranded. Despite the humorous premise, the production expenditures were extremely high. This was the most costly episode in the show's history at an astounding $50,000, or almost $400,000 in today's currency. The sophisticated safety precautions and complex set design needed to execute the sequence were major contributors to the high cost. The production team had to construct a life-sized billboard set with a functional soup bowl big enough to fit Jerry Mathers, unlike nowadays when CGI could easily create the illusion. As a result, the scene became one of the most recognizable parts of the show, making it television gold. According to Mathers' reflections on the episode, the set seemed far more frightening than it appeared on TV. The episode is still a testament to the show's dedication to physical humor and practical effects, demonstrating how a little curiosity may occasionally result in a lot of trouble and a memorable television moment. The show never made it into the top 30. Throughout its 6-season run, Leave It to Beaver failed to place in Nielsen's coveted top 30 despite its cultural significance. Television was a fiercely competitive industry in the late 1950s and early 1960s, which may seem unexpected today. Regarding ratings at the time, shows like The Ford Show, The Ann Sothern Show, and The Gary Moore Show, now mostly forgotten, performed better than Leave It to Beaver. Low ratings do not, however, invariably indicate poor quality. Despite failing to dominate the numbers, several of history's most cherished television programs like Freaks and Geeks and The Twilight Zone eventually developed cult followings. Nielsen metrics alone are insufficient to gauge Leave It to Beaver's influence. With its unique approach to childhood experiences, the show struck a profound chord with viewers. Reruns gave it a second chance at life, making it a nostalgic television show's mainstay. Therefore, the memory of Leave It to Beaver has outlasted many of the series that formerly outranked it, even though it may never have been a ratings powerhouse. Mathers was the first child actor to get merchandise royalties. By obtaining a portion of Leave It to Beaver's merchandise sales, Jerry Mathers created history in a manner that most young actors of his era could only imagine. Mathers became the first preteen to get royalties from item sales, even though child actors in Hollywood were frequently underappreciated and paid poorly. Taking into account the then-current industry standard, this was a revolutionary move. Everything from comic books and figurines to board games and lunchboxes was filled with Leave It to Beaver souvenirs. Mathers was given a portion of each transaction due to his parents' and agents' astute bargaining. This agreement, almost unprecedented in the 1950s, established a standard for aspiring young performers. Mathers cleared the path for similar partnerships that have benefited young stars like Millie Bobby Brown and Daniel Radcliffe more recently. In retrospect, it isn't easy to think how things could have turned out if his parents hadn't negotiated that agreement. Many child stars in his time toiled for meager pay, only to have their images displayed on toy store shelves without getting paid. Mathers pioneered entertainment contracts. Therefore, he was more than just a TV personality. Beverly Cleary wrote Leave It to Beaver novels. Known for her works on Ramona Quimby and Henry Huggins, renowned children's novelist Beverly Cleary was surprisingly assigned to write tie-in novels for Leave It to Beaver. Although it might seem like a great fit, childhood mischief being a common theme in her books, Cleary didn't find the experience particularly exciting. She acknowledged that the assignment was boring compared to her typical work in an interview with the LA Times. Nevertheless, the novels were a success despite her lack of enthusiasm. Beaver Cleaver's world benefited greatly from Cleary's ability to capture the voice of children, and her works were even honored with a Newbery Medal and a National Book Award. She frequently received letters from fans who said the books were superior to the TV. Cleary jokingly said this was because she reduced Beaver's father's extensive life lessons. Nevertheless, the Leave It to Beaver novels are an intriguing side note in her remarkable career, even though she wasn't incredibly excited about writing them. Although tie-in books are rarely regarded as award-worthy works of literature, Beverly Cleary was not your typical author. The family was forced to move. Moving the Cleaver family from 485 Mapleton Drive to 211 Pine Street was a backstage requirement as much as a plot choice. In its early years, the show was produced on the Republic Studios lot, which also served as a backdrop for several TV shows and movies. However, a new home facade was required when the production relocated to Universal Studios. Producers chose to relocate the exterior of the Cleaver home to the Universal lot, where it became a part of the famous neighborhood, rather than building a whole new set. In addition to being the home of the Cleaver family, the Pine Street house later appeared in other well-known television programs, such as Desperate Housewives and Marcus Welby, M.D. Its timeless style made it the ideal suburban setting, and astute viewers of television history may have noticed it in several productions. Although viewers found the change smooth, it was a novel one for a sitcom. However, the change strengthened the show's enduring impact and demonstrated that a strategically situated set could become a landmark in television history. Some jokes were removed from scripts. Leave It to Beaver purposefully kept its humor subdued, in contrast to other comedies of the time that thrived on moments of laughter. The show's tone was distinct, warm and playful, without being too humorous. According to Tony Dow, a line or joke that got too much laughter was removed during a script reading. Why? Laughs, not belly laughs, were what the showrunners sought. This innovative choice distinguished the program from sitcoms that mainly depended on large humorous payoffs, such as I Love Lucy and The Honeymooners. The producers felt that rather than relying on exaggerated antics, the humor should simply flow from the characters' personalities. This explains why Wally's older brother's knowledge and Beaver's naive miscommunications felt so natural, even expressions such as, "Gee, Wally." Without being coerced, they became iconic catchphrases. Since it never felt antiquated or overly staged, the show's nuanced approach to humor helped it endure. Leave It to Beaver was one of the most relevant series of its era because it maintained a lighthearted and realistic tone while capturing the authentic charm of typical family life. Barbara Billingsley's accessories had a purpose. In addition to upholding the ideal of a 1950s housewife, June Cleaver had utilitarian motivations for her well-groomed and put-together appearance. The iconic pearl necklace worn by Barbara Billingsley had a purpose in addition to being a fashion accessory. In an interview, she disclosed that wearing pearls was an easy way to cover up a hollow in her neck that was obvious on camera. The necklace gave June's character an additional touch of refinement and became a staple in her outfit. She also used her shoes as a backstage trick. Billingsley had to wear high heels to preserve her height disparity on television as Tony Dow and Jerry Mathers became taller. The boys' development spurts made it more and more challenging to keep the show consistent across its 6-season run. Billingsley even joked about how happy she was that she wasn't forced to stand on an apple box. These minor but intriguing elements demonstrate the amount of consideration that went into crafting the ideal on-screen dynamic. June Cleaver's casual elegance was more than simply fashion. It was a skillfully constructed illusion that preserved the show's innocent look. The first planned series finale. Television shows did not usually conclude with meticulously prepared last episodes in the 1960s. There was no resolution for the characters when several series were abruptly discontinued. However, by presenting a thoughtful series ending, Leave It to Beaver set a new standard. Family Scrapbook was an episode that took viewers on a nostalgic trip through the show's history. In addition to revealing a long-standing mystery, how Beaver earned his nickname, it included a touching montage of historical incidents. The show's conclusion seemed appropriate given that Wally was leaving for college and that Beaver, played by Jerry Mathers, was excited to attend a high school outside of Hollywood. Leave It to Beaver gave viewers a nice ending, unlike many shows of the time that left them hanging. Being ahead of its time, this maneuver helped other shows, like Howdy Doody and The Fugitive, plan their exits. Even while many fans found it difficult to say goodbye to the Cleaver family, the show's deft conclusion made sure that future generations would remember it with nostalgia. Hugh Beaumont's life as a minister. Hugh Beaumont, an ordained clergyman, had a very different vocation before becoming the archetypal parent figure on Leave It to Beaver. Beaumont preached at a Methodist congregation before Hollywood, but the church didn't pay well enough. He entered the entertainment business by taking acting and modeling jobs to help support his family. Compared to the compassionate Ward Cleaver, Beaumont initially portrayed tough guy characters in crime dramas and film noirs. He applied his real-life principles to the character when he was cast as the Cleaver patriarch, which helped the show's Ward become a stable moral compass. Beaumont maintained a close relationship with his faith despite his Hollywood success. He frequently participated in religious events and created and directed movies with Christian themes. Ward Cleaver is one of the most adored father figures in television history, even though most viewers remember him as a patient and wise TV parent. His experience as a clergyman also influenced his portrayal. He became a beloved character on Leave It to Beaver because of his ability to combine kindness, discipline, and moral instruction. Audiences still find him endearing today. Eddie Haskell was not Alice Cooper. The assertion that Ken Osmond, who portrayed the naughty Eddie Haskell in Leave It to Beaver, went on to become rock singer Alice Cooper, is among the more outrageous urban legends about the show. Cooper was the one who started the rumor, which spread like wildfire. He made a joke in an interview about how his rebellious upbringing made him like Eddie Haskell, which some people took literally. The reality? Alice Cooper and Ken Osmond were very different individuals. While Alice Cooper made a career out of shock rock and theatrical performances, Osmond was a committed actor who became a distinguished Los Angeles police officer. Cooper had to address the persistent allegations several times, even going so far as to claim on The Tonight Show that he had never met Osmond. Osmond, meanwhile, laughed at the circumstance and acknowledged that it wasn't the worst thing in the world to be mistaken for a rock star. This confusion demonstrates how some misconceptions from popular culture can become self-sustaining. Despite the strange allegation, both men left enduring legacies, one as a rock icon and the other as one of TV's most memorable troublemakers. The Cleavers were based in Wisconsin. Fans were left to guess the location of the Cleavers' hometown because it was never explicitly addressed in Leave It to Beaver. However, astute viewers noticed signs throughout the show that the Cleavers were Wisconsin residents. Wally's statement that his high school band was going to Madison for a competition was one of the most significant hints. When the Cleaver family organized a trip to visit the Green Bay Packers, an adored team in Wisconsin, there was still another allusion. Some fans contend that the town was intended to be an idealized representation of 1950s suburban America rather than a specific location, even though these clues strongly imply a Midwestern setting. To make the Cleavers accessible to families nationwide, the show's makers purposefully kept the place ambiguous. Interestingly, the fake town map from Leave It to Beaver was used for the Munsters when the show switched to color in its later years, further solidifying the notion that it was intended to depict an all-American suburb rather than an actual metropolis. Whether or not it was set in Wisconsin, the Cleaver household struck a chord with many viewers, perfectly encapsulating small-town life in post-war America. The Cleavers almost had different faces. Though those roles weren't permanently fixed, it's challenging to imagine Leave It to Beaver without Tony Dow as the trustworthy Wally or Hugh Beaumont as the sage and sensible Ward Cleaver. The only two actors who remained in the final series were Jerry Mathers and Barbara Billingsley, who starred in the 1957 pilot episode of It's a Small World. Actors Paul Sullivan and Max Showalter played Wally and Ward, respectively, in the original. However, the characters were recast and history was made when CBS decided to pick up the show. Despite having minimal acting experience, Tony Dow impressed producers and was cast as Wally. In the meantime, Hugh Beaumont took over Ward's role, lending the character the composed and reflective manner that defined him. The program benefited from the adjustments because there was no denying the chemistry between the remaining cast members. Later, Jerry Mathers thought about how the series would have been different if the original cast had stayed. Fortunately, Leave It to Beaver became one of the most cherished family sitcoms thanks to the final casting choices. Wally and Beaver became friends later in life. Beaver and Wally had the ideal brotherly dynamic on film, with Beaver always getting into mischief and Wally being the protective older sibling. However, throughout the filming, Tony Dow and Jerry Mathers don't have the same relationship behind the scenes. They had diverse interests and social circles because they were 5 years apart. While Dow was a teenager more interested in athletics and other things, Mathers, still a youngster, was frequently preoccupied with academics on set. They consequently rarely spent time together outside of work. The two didn't get close until decades later. Their friendship was rekindled in the 1980s when they got back together for theater productions and the television film Still the Beaver. By then, both men had grown to appreciate one another and understood the significance of their shared past to supporters. Together, they frequently appeared publicly, honoring the show's lasting legacy and reminiscing about their Leave It to Beaver days. Their late-blooming friendship is evidence that real-life relationships don't always seem like they do on TV. But in this instance, everything worked out. The show became a college subject. Although intended as a humorous family sitcom, Leave It to Beaver's influence has been examined in fields beyond television history. The show is analyzed as a portrayal of 1950s American ideals in several academic sociology and media studies classes. By contrasting it with more contemporary sitcoms like Modern Family and The Simpsons, academics examine how it depicted gender roles, family dynamics, and suburban life. While some explore the show's underlying themes of moral teachings and personal development, others contend that the Cleaver home embodied the perfect post-war American dream. Even episodes have been utilized as case studies by universities to explore how media portrayals of family values have changed. Interestingly, Leave It to Beaver wasn't intended to be a profound societal critique at first. Still, because of the way it portrays ordinary life, it has become a significant cultural document. Scholars continue to argue over whether the show depicted 1950s America or if it was a romanticized portrayal intended to reassure viewers. Whatever the scholarly perspective, one thing is sure. Leave It to Beaver has endured over time as a representation of a bygone age and fun. Wally cost Dow future roles. Although Tony Dow's portrayal of Wally Cleaver made him famous, it also hampered his career. His clean-cut, all-American image in Hollywood made it practically hard for him to get different jobs. Casting directors were unable to look past Wally's skill. In a 2019 interview, Dow vented his aggravation over being handed apple pie jobs all the time when he wanted to pursue serious acting. He managed to get guest appearances on programs like Mr. Novak and Dr. Kildare, but he found it difficult to dispel Wally's reputation. Because of the extreme typecasting, Dow finally took a break from acting and worked as a director, sculptor, and construction worker. It's interesting to note that he frequently appeared in Leave It to Beaver revivals when he did rejoin the industry. Despite accepting his famous status, he undoubtedly lost out on chances. Many iconic TV actors, such as George Reeves as Superman and Henry Winkler as the Fonz, faced similar challenges. However, Dow's problem with typecasting demonstrates Hollywood's propensity to categorize players into a single identity. Ultimately, Dow's reputation endured, showing that although Wally Cleaver eclipsed his career, he was still a cherished television legend. Hugh Beaumont's tough guy passed. Fans of Leave It to Beaver might be surprised to learn that Hugh Beaumont had a very different on-screen character before he became America's perfect TV parent. Beaumont's most well-known roles during the 1940s and early 1950s were as merciless crooks and hard-boiled cops. In several crime movies, he played private investigator Michael Shane, a tough-talking gumshoe who wasn't hesitant to use force. He has starred as a gangster or dubious character in classic noir films. The kind and astute Ward Cleaver starkly contrasted with Beaumont's roughness on film. Although he joked that they weren't exactly what a preacher, like Beaumont was in real life, would want to be known for, even Jerry Mathers acknowledged that Beaumont's prior roles took him aback. But Beaumont's versatility was demonstrated by his ability to play both the tough guy and the loving parent with conviction. Interestingly, he never imagined becoming a TV star when he first took acting gigs to pay for his theological studies. His early career demonstrated that he might just as well have been the antagonist, even if Leave It to Beaver solidified his reputation as America's ideal father. He was able to play both the loving father and the strict disciplinarian, which may have contributed to the authenticity of his portrayal of Ward. Chrysler forced the car swap. Product placement was popular during the Leave It to Beaver period, and manufacturers wanted to capitalize on the show's benign image. Ward Cleaver drove a Ford in the first 2 seasons, a reliable but unimpressive vehicle that suited his persona. However, there was an instant issue when Chrysler joined as a key sponsor in Season 3. Their most significant rival's vehicle was featured frequently. Chrysler intervened immediately and insisted that Ward take one of their cars instead. In compliance, the manufacturers replaced the Ford with a sporty Plymouth Fury. This was a calculated approach rather than a haphazard replacement. Car manufacturers ensured their cars had shows. Because of their sponsorship, Chrysler's vehicles were widely displayed, highlighting the dependability and style of their brand. Leave It to Beaver wasn't the first show to use this kind of commercial placement. Several other classic series have advertised sponsor products gently or not so softly. Car connoisseurs undoubtedly noticed the switch, even though spectators might not have. This behind-the-scenes exchange now reminds us of how corporate power influenced even the most moral TV programs. Lost pilot found decades later. It's a Small World, the first episode of Leave It to Beaver, was broadcast in 1957, but for many years it was thought to be lost forever. Fans have no means to watch the pilot for 30 years because it wasn't frequently rerun like the rest of the series. Like many early TV recordings, many people thought the episode was lost forever, misplaced, or destroyed. Then everything changed in 1987 due to a startling revelation. After being undisturbed for 30 years, the pilot was discovered at an Illinois storage facility. Because it had early versions of the characters, including different actors for Ward and Wally, its recovery was significant to both fans and TV historians. Longtime viewers were treated to a nostalgic delight when it eventually returned and featured in a Disney Channel special. The unearthing of the lost pilot brought to light the vulnerability of early television history. Poor archival techniques have resulted in the loss of countless historic TV episodes, but fans of Leave It to Beaver were fortunate to have one of their most important pieces of history preserved in time. Judy Hensler's exit over puberty. Growing up on film can be challenging for child performers, and Jerry Wheel, who portrayed the snobby Judy Hensler, was no exception. Judy loved taunting and tattling about Beaver, Beaver's classroom enemy, but her time on the show ended suddenly. The producers weren't overjoyed when Wheel reached puberty. They allegedly urged her to tie her chest to preserve her youthful appearance, which was an awkward and degrading request for a young actress. Wheel resisted, defending herself, but the repercussions were immediate. Judy Hensler was fired from the program. In contrast to other characters who had appropriate departures, Judy just vanished and was never heard from again. Later, Wheel talked about the experience and how challenging it was to deal with the demands of Hollywood as a young star. She eventually gave up acting entirely and pursued a profession away from the spotlight. Her narrative is just one of many that show the complex realities of being a young performer in a field that is fixated on appearances. In a time when child performers had little influence over their careers, Jerry Wheel's choice to stand her own is still a potent symbol of self-respect, even though Judy Hensler may have disappeared from Leave It to Beaver. Mather's bond with Hitchcock. Jerry Mathers encountered one of the greatest movie giants, Alfred Hitchcock, before becoming Beaver Cleaver. In 1955, Mathers was cast in the suspenseful Masters dark comedy, The Trouble with Harry. Mathers, who was just 7 years old, was unaware he was collaborating with one of Hollywood's most renowned directors. But there were still more shocks in store for fate. Mathers and Hitchcock frequently interacted during Leave It to Beaver's filming because the show was close to the Alfred Hitchcock Presents location. Hitchcock respected him greatly and never referred to him as merely another kid actor, always calling him Mr. Mathers. Their brief but unforgettable interactions reaffirmed Mathers' early Hollywood background. How many young actors could say they were on a first-name basis with Alfred Hitchcock? These incidents were an intriguing postscript in Mathers' career. The false report of Mathers' death. In 1968, Jerry Mathers experienced what it was like to wake up to the news that he had been proclaimed dead. Mathers was a U.S. Air Force Reserve member but was never sent abroad, but the media assumed it was Jerry Mathers when an obituary appeared stating that J. Mathers had been killed in action in Vietnam. Newspapers and television shows lamented the alleged passing of the former child star as the bogus tale spread like wildfire. He even died valiantly in battle, according to some. The rumors weren't stopped until Mathers himself made a television appearance. Another serviceman with the same name made the error, but the damage was already done. Mathers subsequently chuckled at the strange occurrence, making him one of the few famous people who had to affirm they were still alive publicly. Lumpy Rutherford's real-life fortune. On Leave It to Beaver, Clarence Lumpy Rutherford was the endearing oaf, but Frank Bank, the actor who played him, was anything but a simpleton. Unlike his character, Bank had a brilliant eye for business and investments and wasn't the brightest tool in the shed. Following a slowdown in his acting career, Bank unexpectedly turned to finance and became a successful stockbroker. He was making over $300,000 annually by the time he was well established in his new business, which is an incredible sum for someone once regarded as the schoolyard bully. Many of his former co-stars, such as Barbara Billingsley, Tony Dow, and Jerry Mathers, became his clients because of his extraordinary financial sense. Bank demonstrated that intelligence off-screen was more important than acting as a clown on it, whereas many child stars struggle after leaving Hollywood. Larry Mondello's helicopter mom ruined everything. Sometimes the parent is the one causing the trouble, not the child actor. Beaver's naughty best friend, Larry Mondello, was portrayed by Robert Rusty Stevens. However, Larry unexpectedly vanished from Leave It to Beaver despite being a popular favorite. Why? His mother was too controlling, according to later disclosures by Barbara Billingsley. Stevens' mother frequently disrupted filming by fighting with the crew and making irrational requests. The show's creators had had enough and concluded that writing Larry out ultimately was the simplest way to fix the issue. Stevens' exit from the program was permanent because he never returned to Hollywood. Stevens' absence was still apparent when the group got back together decades later. Even the biggest miscreant on Leave It to Beaver couldn't compete with a controlling mother, but his character had been a mainstay of the program. The real-life inspiration for Beaver and Wally. Have you ever wondered why Leave It to Beaver seemed so real? As it happens, much of the show's attractiveness was derived from actual events. Joe Connolly, a co-creator, found inspiration in his two sons, Ricky and Jay, right in his own home. His own children's chats and antics served as the inspiration for many of the misadventures that were shown on the show. Because of this intimate touch, Beaver's childhood hardships were genuine, and the program had a realistic quality that people found compelling. Connolly wrote from a personal place, from the lessons learned to the innocent mistakes. The show's iconic episodes, such as when Beaver becomes trapped in a gigantic soup billboard, were inspired by actual events. The father narrating his children's tales was the key to Leave It to Beaver's success, making the program a poignant portrayal of American childhood in real life. It wasn't just nostalgia or excellent acting. A future Simpson on set. There were many guest stars on Leave It to Beaver, but one young actor would go on to voice some of the most recognizable characters on television. Harry Shearer, then 14 years old, appeared as the show's minor character, Frankie, in an episode from 1961. Shearer was just another young actor at the moment, but decades later, his career would take a famous turn. He became one of the Simpsons' most well-known voice actors, bringing to life characters such as the sardonic Principal Skinner, the evil Mr. Burns, and the perpetually upbeat Ned Flanders. Despite briefly appearing on Leave It to Beaver, Shearer would have a different path in showbiz. He played a significant role in the longest-running animated sitcom in history because of his voice acting skills. Even though his voice has been heard for over 30 years, fans who revisit his episode may not recognize his face. Even minor roles may lead to impressive careers, as demonstrated by this intriguing relationship between two of TV's most cherished programs. Mather's short-lived music career. Actors all around Hollywood aspire to be rock stars, and Jerry Mathers was no different. Mathers took a stab at the music business when Leave It to Beaver was still airing, releasing the single Don't Cry under Atlantic Records in 1962. Mathers attempted to position himself as a teenage heartthrob to capitalize on his TV popularity, but the song did not chart. Unfazed, he started a band named Beaver and the Trappers, a moniker intended to appeal to Leave It to Beaver fans. Despite their best efforts, the ensemble failed to make an impression, and Mathers' musical career eventually dwindled. Mathers did not have the same level of success as other child stars who switched to music, such as Donny Osmond or Ricky Nelson. His brief stint in the business is nonetheless a fascinating side note to his career. Mathers' reputation as Beaver Cleaver was more than enough to secure his place in television history, even though his music didn't catch on. Additionally, Don't Cry remains a nostalgic representation of 1960s pop culture for listeners interested in his music. Whitey's tragic downfall. Stanley Fafara, who played Whitey Whitney on Leave It to Beaver, discovered the hard way that Hollywood's bright lights may fade swiftly. Despite appearing in one of the most popular television programs as a child actor, Fafara found it challenging to adjust to adulthood after Leave It to Beaver concluded in 1963. Like many previous child stars, he developed a drug addiction that ultimately resulted in homelessness and a life of crime. He spent years in and out of rehab facilities as his addiction consumed his income. He was broke when he passed away in 2003 at the age of 54. Unfortunately, his family couldn't even purchase a headstone for his grave because he was so impoverished. His grave was left unmarked for 13 years, serving as a sobering reminder of his hardships. He finally received a suitable headstone in 2016 thanks to fundraising efforts by a group of Leave It to Beaver supporters. Even though his narrative is tragic, it also warns about the perils of childhood stardom and the challenges of life outside of Hollywood. Tony Dow's artistic talent. Tony Dow was an artist in every way. He was more than just a TV personality. He discovered that sculpting was his genuine interest long after he finished playing Wally Cleaver. He frequently bronze-crafted creations that achieved widespread acclaim. Some were even shown at the Louvre in Paris. His art was more than a pastime. It was a means of expressing his emotions and inventiveness in ways that acting could never. Dow has said that sculpture gave him a purpose outside of Hollywood and helped him deal with the demands of childhood fame. Despite his success as an artist, he maintained his modesty about his gift, once remarking that people were frequently taken aback when they saw Wally Cleaver producing expensive sculptures. There was much more to him than the tidy elder brother from Leave It to Beaver, as evidenced by the depth and reflection in his work. One intriguing but little-known aspect of his life is his legacy in the art world. Barbara Billingsley's hidden talent. Despite being the quintessential 1950s TV mom, Barbara Billingsley had a humorous side that few anticipated. She stunned viewers 1980 with her funny performance in the film Airplane, which portrayed a kind old lady fluent in jive. The sequence became one of the most iconic moments in comedy history, demonstrating Billingsley's perfect timing and ability to parody her image of wholesomeness. She acknowledged in interviews that she accepted the role to avoid being typecast, and it was a great success. She gained fresh professional respect for her performance, demonstrating her range as an actress. June Cleaver's ability to translate street slang easily astounded Leave It to Beaver fans, and it became one of the most quoted roles, even while she will always be known as the kind TV mother of Airplane and solidified her reputation as a comic legend. Hugh Beaumont's dual role. In addition to being the sage and understanding Ward Cleaver, Hugh Beaumont was a gifted filmmaker. Although viewers most remember him as the fatherly character on Leave It to Beaver, he also directed several episodes. Before being cast as Ward, Beaumont had a long history in film noir, frequently portraying tough guys and detectives in the 1940s and 1950s. However, after moving into television, he became interested in directing because he wanted to make a more imaginative contribution. He influenced the show's plot during his time behind the camera by contributing a distinct viewpoint that could only be provided by an actor who later became a director. His directing was renowned for its organic flow, emphasizing character growth above ostentatious methods. His influence on acting and directing is still a significant aspect of Leave It to Beaver's legacy, even though he eventually left Hollywood to become a Methodist pastor. Beaver's iconic cap. Beaver Cleaver's reliable baseball cap is among the most iconic accessories in television history. It wasn't merely a haphazard wardrobe choice. It grew to represent his impish nature and childlike purity. Whether it was being thrown in a fury, worn backward when Beaver was feeling rebellious, or used to conceal humiliation, the cap frequently played a part in the show's narrative. Jerry Mathers became so devoted to the headgear off-screen that he kept wearing it even when the cameras weren't filming. Like Tom Sawyer's straw hat or Dennis the Menace's slingshot, Beaver's appearance became a mainstay thanks to the show's admirers. Beaver's cap helped him to feel more like a typical everyday child, unlike other TV kids of the day who sported well-groomed hair and elegant attire. The cap made a sentimental comeback when Mathers returned to his role in reunion specials decades later, demonstrating that some things are always in style. The show's original title. The sitcom was known as Wally and the Beaver before Leave It to Beaver became a household name. Although the original title implied that the show would concentrate on both brothers, producers soon saw the young Theodore Beaver Cleaver and his numerous boyhood mishaps were the main emphasis. The title change was also calculated. Executives thought Leave It to Beaver emphasized Beaver's distinct outlook on life and had a catchier, more captivating sound. Interestingly, network officials first hesitated to use the name Beaver, believing it was too exotic for a main character. But the name stayed because its creator, Joe Connolly, had modeled it after a real boyhood pal. Audiences responded favorably to the final title, which encapsulated Beaver's world's innocence and wonder. In hindsight, the alteration was a wise choice since it provided the program with a timeless and unforgettable identity that continues to appeal to viewers decades later. Ken Osmond's real-life career. Ken Osmond, known for playing the naughty and dishonest Eddie Haskell, had a pretty different existence from the troublemaking character he played on television. He struggled to break free from typecasting once the show finished, so he pursued a career outside Hollywood. He joined the Los Angeles Police Department in 1970 and remained there for 18 years. He was frequently in dangerous situations at work, and in 1980, while pursuing a suspected auto thief, he was shot 3 times. His bulletproof vest miraculously saved his life. He gained great respect from his peers due to the episode, which reaffirmed his courage and commitment to public service. Even after serving in law enforcement, he was never wholly free from Eddie Haskell's shadow. Cops and civilians frequently recognized him, and some even refused to accept that he was a legitimate police officer. Osmond occasionally resumed acting after retiring owing to injuries, but his legacy as an officer and an actor is still genuinely exceptional. The Cleaver House exterior. The charming home of the Cleaver family became one of the most iconic television homes ever. However, the exterior scenes were recorded on the Universal Studios back lot rather than in a suburban neighborhood. Situated initially on Colonial Street, a well-known shooting site, the house became the home of various television families, including the protagonists from Desperate Housewives decades later. The outside of the Cleaver house was somewhat altered over time, but it continued to represent the suburban bliss of the 1950s. Curiously, the house's inside was a studio where every aspect was meticulously regulated for filming rather than an actual residence. With its tastefully placed furnishings and immaculately decorated chambers, the set design significantly contributed to the show's cozy, nostalgic atmosphere. The mansion is still visible to guests who visit Universal Studios today, bringing back memories of a more carefree era when Beaver and Wally wandered its halls and picked up life lessons from their devoted parents. Lumpy Rutherford's nickname. One of the most noteworthy supporting characters on Leave It to Beaver was Frank Banks' character, Clarence Lumpy Rutherford, characterized by his blustery demeanor and commanding presence. Lumpy, his moniker, wasn't chosen randomly. It was intended to draw attention to his stocky frame and somewhat awkward demeanor. The moniker, however, took on a life of its own and came to characterize him. Even though Lumpy was characterized as Eddie Haskell's dim-witted sidekick and a bit of a bully, he occasionally showed generosity, proving that even the roughest youngsters had a soft side. Frank Bank was quite different off-screen than he was on. An astute businessman, he became a prosperous stockbroker, overseeing investments for several Hollywood stars. Knowing that Lumpy would live on as a memorable piece of television history, he always embraced his Leave It to Beaver legacy, even though he disassociated himself from acting after the show concluded. The show's cultural impact. Few television programs have had as much of an impact on American culture as Leave It to Beaver. Despite being a minor hit during its initial run, it became a syndication legend and influenced how people perceived family life in the 1950s. In the show's idealistic portrayal of suburban America, issues were always resolved by candor, tolerance, and a warm family conversation. Numerous sitcoms that came after, such as Family Ties, Full House, and The Brady Bunch, were impacted by this representation. Although some critics contend that the show offered a too essential perspective on life, others commended for encapsulating a sense of stability and innocence that many viewers found reassuring. Its timeless comedy and realistic childhood experiences are appreciated even by contemporary audiences. The show's universal themes of maturing, life lessons learned, and the value of family endure. A well-told family tale is timeless, as evidenced by the fact that Leave It to Beaver is still cherished decades later. Jerry Mather's military service. After Leave It to Beaver, Jerry Mathers followed a different route than most child stars who find it challenging to transition to adulthood. He joined the U.S. military in the late 1960s. During significant turmoil, he honorably served his country as an Air Force Reserve member. But there was a strange rumor that he had been slain in Vietnam while serving in combat. Newspapers even covered this fabricated article because it was so extensively circulated. A soldier with a similar name who had died in the conflict was probably the cause of the confusion. Mathers later laughed as he recounted the time he had to declare that he was alive and well publicly. Although it marked a considerable break from Hollywood, his military service demonstrated his discipline and sense of duty. After doing his time, he eventually returned to showbiz, becoming a well-liked spokesperson for Leave It to Beaver and ensuring his reputation endured beyond his early fame. The Beaver's real-life brother. Leave It to Beaver viewers may not be aware that Jimmy, Jerry Mathers' younger brother, also appeared on the program. In a few episodes, Jimmy was cast as one of Beaver's school pals, while Jerry played the titular part. Jimmy fits nicely in with the show's milieu. Even though his appearances were brief, few noted the light-hearted, behind-the-scenes relationship they marked. Jimmy didn't pursue a long-term acting career like his older brother did, but he did do some short-term television and commercial work. Jerry Mathers' experience on set perhaps felt more familiar because he had a sister working in the business. Interestingly, real-life family members appeared in many vintage TV series, although Leave It to Beaver understated this aspect. Even though Jimmy's acting career was brief, his little part gave the show a genuine feel and demonstrated that the Mathers family had skill, even though only one became a television star. The show's syndication success. The tale of Leave It to Beaver continued long after it finished in 1963. The sitcom attracted a vast new following when it went into syndication, demonstrating that the timeless morals and realistic tales of the Cleaver family could appeal to a wide range of age groups. Leave It to Beaver was shot in a high-quality 35mm film, which gave it a clean and clear appearance when rerun on contemporary television, in contrast to many sitcoms of its era. This made it unique and guaranteed it would be appreciated decades later. As a result of the show's success in syndication, Still the Beaver, a revival film from the 1980s, was later developed into a sequel series. Generations of children saw Beaver's antics, demonstrating the timeless appeal of compelling narrative and universal themes. The program is still a beloved classic regularly broadcast on vintage TV networks. Leave It to Beaver is one of the most adored sitcoms in television history because of its ongoing appeal. The Cleavers' middle-class lifestyle. By depicting a genuine middle-class family, Leave It to Beaver challenged the stereotype of TV families at a period when many of them were either unreasonably wealthy or flawless. As was typical of families in the 1950s and early 1960s, the Cleavers were modest. Ward worked a solid office job, June was a stay-at-home mother, and they lived in a cozy suburban home. The show concentrated on commonplace issues, such as school conflicts, neighborhood arguments, and moral lessons, in contrast to other sitcoms that depended on inflated narratives. It was a welcome departure from the more dramatic TV series of the time because of its realism. The Cleavers Society was one of the first to address serious problems like bullying, accountability, and honesty, even though some critics contend it was still idealized. Simple storylines frequently have the most significant impact, as seen by the show's portrayal of an ordinary American family, which set the bar for later sitcoms and inspired shows like Malcolm in the Middle and The Wonder Years. Tony Dow's directorial career. After his acting career, Tony Dow was able to successfully reinvent himself behind the camera, albeit he will always be remembered as Wally Cleaver. In contrast to many child stars who find it challenging to remain in the business, Dow moved into directing and worked on popular television programs in the 1980s and 1990s. Beyond his on-screen performances, he demonstrated a strong sense of narrative by directing episodes of Coach, Harry and the Hendersons, and Star Trek Deep Space Nine. He has a distinct viewpoint from his experience as a young actor, enabling him to relate to actors in a manner that many directors cannot. Because of his creative training, he was a skilled sculptor, Dow was able to create visually pleasing scenarios. His accomplishments behind the camera showed he could do much more than just be the responsible big brother. Tony Dow's contributions to television as a director meant he left a lasting legacy on the industry in multiple ways, even if Wally Cleaver made him famous. The show's theme song. The lively, whimsical song that came to be associated with Leave It to Beaver, The Toy Parade, is one of the most instantly remembered TV themes. The theme, composed initially by David Kahn, Melvin Leonard, and Mort Green, featured lyrics, but most fans only recall its catchy instrumental version. The theme was gradually altered, with the tempo a little upped in subsequent seasons to make it seem more lively. The song established the tone for Beaver's early escapades and reflected the show's young exuberance. The tone of the Toy Parade, which mirrored Beaver's demeanor, was lighthearted and almost naughty, in contrast to many sitcoms of the time that had elaborate symphonic music. Even now, decades later, listening to a few chords of the song takes listeners back to the Cleaver family's dreamy 1950s suburbia. The theme is still among the most cherished and sentimental pieces of vintage television music, demonstrating that even a straightforward melody can have a profound effect. Beaver's catchphrase. Every iconic television program has a catchphrase that people remember, including Beaver's famous wide-eyed cry, "Gee, Wally!" The expression became a mainstay of the program, frequently expressing Beaver's awe, perplexity, or annoyance at his elder brother's insight. Whether he was appreciating Wally's counsel or recognizing that he had embroiled himself in yet another predicament, "Gee, Wally" was Beaver's standard response. The line was manufactured, but it sounded natural since it echoed how children spoke then, which added to the program's authenticity. Those who have never seen the show can now identify it since it has become so embedded in popular culture. Numerous TV series, films, and political speeches have referred to it. The phrase has been adopted by Jerry Mathers, who frequently uses it in jest during interviews. More than a simple exchange of words, "Gee, Wally," it continues to represent innocence in childhood and fraternal friendship. The show's realistic dialogue. The dedication to realism, particularly in its dialogue, was one of the things that set Leave It to Beaver apart from other sitcoms of its day. The show's creators attempted to depict how children spoke rather than the stylized, exaggerated dialogue common in 1950s television. One of the show's creators, Joe Connolly, would frequently write down things his kids said and use them in the scripts. This strategy gave Wally and Beaver's conversations an authentic feel, regardless of whether they were lighthearted, contentious, or an attempt to avoid conflict. Beaver frequently stuttered over his words or expressed things poorly, just like a genuine child would, unlike adult characters who talked in whole, formal sentences. Because of this attention to detail, viewers could relate to the characters more deeply. The show's lifelike dialogue is still one of its most notable features decades later, and it had a significant impact on sitcom writers' approaches to writing for young actors. The Cleavers' neighbor, Larry Mondello. Like all great TV characters, Beaver Cleaver had a best buddy named Larry Mondello, who often gets him into trouble. Larry, played by Rusty Stevens, was the plump, naughty child with a half-baked plan that would eventually get Beaver in trouble. Larry was the quintessential negative influence, but in a sweet, innocent way, whether he was persuading Beaver to play hooky, borrow something without asking, or commit a practical joke. He constantly ate or discussed his next snack because of his insatiable appetite. The Cleavers were a close-knit family, but Larry's home life was slightly different from Beaver's. He was often left alone by his invisible father, which created an intriguing contrast. When Rusty Stevens left the program after a few seasons, Larry vanished, but his influence lasted. Fans regard him as one of the most amusing supporting characters, adding fun and intrigue to Beaver's early exploits. The show's legacy. Leave It to Beaver is still regarded as one of the most recognizable sitcoms in television history over 60 years after it debuted. Beaver's enduring influence is demonstrated by the fact that, in contrast to many shows that eventually fade into obscurity, it is still mentioned in popular culture. It contributed to developing the family sitcom genre, opening the door for later masterpieces such as Malcolm in the Middle, Full House, and The Brady Bunch. Generations of viewers found resonance in the show's positive depictions of childhood, sibling relationships, and parental advice. Its legacy was further cemented in 1983 when the actors came together for the made-for-TV film Still the Beaver, which spawned a revived series. Even now, when television has significantly changed, Leave It to Beaver is a sentimental throwback to a more innocent time. The show's impact is indisputable. It remains a standard for family-friendly narrative and is still treasured by viewers who pass it on to younger generations.
If you've watched the video till here, that means you've enjoyed the video. Subscribe. Don't forget to turn on the notifications bell icon